Welcome to the Podcast Discovery Show, the podcast that's about other podcasts. Where each week we have a book club style discussion about a podcast, and at the end of the episode, we're going to bring you a brand new podcast for you to go listen to, and we're going to come back and discuss that one next week. I'm Josh.
I'm Kirk.
And I am Zach.
And this week we're talking to you about Tales from Silicon Valley, Bebo Billionaires, Part 1
Billions.
and Part 2. And no, I did not stutter. The title is Bebo Billionaires, not Bebo Billionaires.
That's what I thought of every time. Like, billions.
So this is a podcast that they dive into the history of some of the things that are monumental in the tech industry now and talk about the origin stories, like the superhero origin story of different things. And I listened to one episode that was about video games and kind of where video games came from and how Pong got started and kind of that whole environment and how Steve Jobs was involved. And he was just like this grimy programmer that was there and like hanging out and just doing his thing. And then he's like, I'm out of here. And then he disappeared to India and then came back and was like he was like enlightened in what he was going to do in the tech industry when he came back. So it was just this, it's really interesting to hear all of these small groups that were like, there was a big melting pot in Silicon Valley back then. And so it's really interesting to hear the really deep history of the things that were happening when all of these things were formed. And then this specific episode I'm recommending or did recommend was about a social media platform I had never even heard of.
Same.
And their rise and fall and where they came from and everything about this story was just, I didn't know anything about any of this.
It's called Bebo, right?
Bebo. Yeah, Bebo.
Yep.
It did get a little confusing to follow at one point because they were, talking about the founders and how they had all the other companies they had started from the very beginning. So it did get a little bit of confusing.
Yeah.
Somewhere through because I think that's a common thing with the Silicon Valley thing. So many startups and, you had 3 or 4 that either didn't make it or didn't make it big and before you get to the one.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And that's what I loved about this show is that they really dove into where did this come from? Not just, hey, here's the story of Bebo, but here's the story of the people that founded Bebo. Here's where Bebo came from and how it came to be and why it was made the way it was. And really just it dove into the whole backstory behind everything and why things were the way they were.
Yeah, and first of all, I love hearing these stories about Silicon Valley because it was crazy out there. And I'm curious whether this show gets into the .com boom because it was crazy. People were throwing money out there. I don't know that we've ever seen this type of thing before because everyone was like, okay, the internet's here. What's it going to mean? And so they were just rolling the dice on whatever these companies were doing. They were not very skeptical of it. They were kind of just going for it. And I like to work in startups, and I've been around them before. I've been in a tech startup, and Silicon Valley startup has a connotation all its own. It has something where they do things differently. They do things that are kind of based on like a hype and based on a feel and an experience of their culture, their culture that they're trying to create. And it's really kind of interesting to look into how all of this was happening because we're talking about billions of dollars. And then it all fell through the ground, completely exploded. Tons of companies went out of business. Tons of things that we didn't hear of, never will hear of again, were funded with millions of dollars.
I would kind of like to hear an episode of their show or a show similar that goes into some of the really, really cool ideas that we've never seen because they, startups that tried to make it that didn't make it.
Because, technically wasn't Napster like the .com boom? Like Napster was like Silicon Valley right during like that.
I don't know when.
That heyday.
I think it was right after. I think it was one of the ones because LimeWire and Napster and all of that was, I think,
it was still pretty early.
It was early 2000s, I think, though.
I know, but that's the boom.
It may have been.
Because, you think about things like Napster and LimeWire, and it had a very specific purpose that is dead now. Like, it's dead. Because some people are still pirating, but music pirating has gone down constantly.
Yeah, I feel like that's not even really a thing anymore.
There's not really a reason to.
Yeah, they gave us options.
Yeah, you got Spotify, you got Pandora, you
got
listen.
Apple Music. Yeah. Pick one. Pick somebody. $10 a month, ad free, whatever you want.
And even
there.
Spotify, it's free to start. Like you just can't like specifically pick.
Yeah,
anyway,
they do the freemium. You know,
it is freemium.
Like it's not a good user experience until you pay. And I mean, but also
It still blew my mind when I first got it.
Oh,
even on the
sure.
free version, I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm not paying anything, and I'm listening to these real songs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and I mean, it's kind of the same. It's almost the same feeling as the first time I got an iPod, where it's like I don't have to carry CDs. I just have all of my music on here.
That used to blow our minds.
Yeah, it was incredible. And then the same thing happened here, where I don't have to carry anything. I don't have to have a hard drive full of anything. I will stream it. I have literally the largest music catalog I've ever had in my life, but I don't have any of it.
Yeah, and that's just the power of the internet. Is basically everyone with a smartphone has more information than has ever existed in the world. Period. At like literally at a
In your
moment's
hand.
notice. Like you want to know something, you can literally pick your phone up and talk to it, and it will tell you what you're asking it.
But yeah.
We've gotten to that point, and it's absurd. And we're creating more information and data and content like per hour than existed in human history prior to like last year. Like it's insane the amount of information that's being created and shared on the internet now, and that we have access to.
It really is mind blowing. But yeah, I feel like that's what started all of this.
Yeah.
That's what started the .com boom. Is people saw potential there. They saw what could be, and even Zuckerberg was starting out realizing the power of the data that he had.
Yeah.
And it's okay. This is a kind of a controversial side of him, but he knew the power that he would have if you uploaded everything you were doing to his website.
Yep.
And he realized what that was worth.
Them talking about like their first concept being what was it?
It was a
hard for
birthday
me to
reminder.
understand.
It was a birthday reminder.
Okay, so it was a birthday reminder, but then they wanted you to give them your contacts.
Yes. Yeah. So
And people,
No, but
this was
and they
brilliant.
asked them.
they acted like this was the first, like, okay, we're going to pull your contacts and we're going to just
But what blew
invite
my
everybody
mind-
automatically.
That's cool and all, but what blew my mind, and the culture's changed so much with the internet and stuff, but they just asked people point blank, can you give us your username and your password?
Yeah.
And people just gave it to them.
Yeah. Everyone did.
It's like, yeah, sure.
And that the crazy thing about that is twofold. One, the fact that they did that. Now every company will say we will never ask you for your password because that's a phishing attempt. That's just something.
I
that
definitely
happens all
remember
the time.
like Blizzard puts out like little tips, on the games, like we will never ask you for your password.
Yep.
Don't tell anybody your password.
So public
Danger.
service announcement, don't ever tell anyone your password to anything. If the company calling you asks for your password, it's not the company calling you. They
Yeah.
have your password
No,
and
it's-
they don't need it.
Yeah, they don't need your password.
So don't ever do that. But it's crazy because this whole episode was talking about Bebo, which is a social media site I never had heard of before this. But they talk about the build up to social media and the competitive landscape of social media as things were building up and the different ones that were coming and going and falling apart. And I love that they started with the birthday reminder, which is now something that's part of Facebook. Is
It literally,
people's birthdays.
that's literally what I was thinking. Is like
And
Facebook's like, yeah, we'll just do that too.
They,
It's fine.
Their whole thought was a self-updating Rolodex. That was their kind of business idea.
No, it's a good idea.
And so the birthday reminder was the first part, and then it would say, do a quiz about yourself and see if your friends know it. And then they're like, what state do you live in? And where were you born? And how old are you? And when's your birthday? So it was like all these information that was like part of the Rolodex was like the quiz about your friends. And then they would ask for your email and password. And then they would send the quiz to everyone in your email book. Then they would be prompted to do the quiz, and then they would make their thing. So it just spread like wildfire, and they created this birthday reminder app. And they ended up selling that for a ton of money.
yeah. Apparently, it was very profitable the whole time.
Yeah, because they were selling greeting cards, like electronic greeting cards of like dancing monkeys and stuff. And
I remember when that
I
was a
remember
thing.
that.
Ton of money,
Yeah,
yeah.
that definitely happened.
Yep.
All the time. That was back when it was like everybody didn't have social media and smartphones weren't what they are. So they're like, hey, I'm going to send you a dumb email that has
Yep,
some weird flash animation on it.
it's a dancing Santa with my face on it.
It's your birthday. Enjoy.
So they started with that, and then they started talking about social media and how it evolved, and they went into like MySpace came out, Friendster came out.
By the way, I agree with them that that's still probably like the best name. I think it's better than
it's really good.
MySpace. It's better than Facebook. The name is just so much better.
No,
than all
yeah,
the
it's
other
really
things.
good.
It stinks that it's
And I mean, I
Not the one that
definitely
made
had a MySpace. I remember when I first got Facebook, I had to have a college email.
So real quick, before we get too far into the social media stuff, I do want to say, like, a nerdy part of me really liked the fact that they talked about why Friendster failed and some of the challenges that these social media sites had when they were growing and scaling, because if you get that many new users, your infrastructure can't keep up with it.
Yeah.
So he said he was literally having to go and buy new hardware and set up new servers in the garage that they were in. So he was literally building computers, hooking them into his server,
It's just so
and increasing the
different now.
server space manually. Now we have the cloud for that. And
Well, yeah, it's
Amazon
AWS. Everybody's going to just AWS
Exactly.
Expand as much as you want, because literally it's everything.
Yep.
That, for anybody who doesn't know, it's Amazon's provider of servers.
Yep.
And
So instead of building a box, you just say, I'm going to put my stuff on Amazon, and Amazon will just put it on their servers, and they'll just add more servers when they need
but
it.
all these guys, and this is part of why I wonder if Silicon Valley is going to have kind of a lore around it, like a mystique.
It already does.
No, and I think it'll stay that way, is what I'm saying. Because literally, Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, like Ballmer, all these guys were in, like, what's his name? Wozniak. We're all in a garage, literally in a garage. They would set up servers. They would build physical hardware in a garage, and they would code all day.
Yep.
That is not the current experience.
No.
What these guys had to do to build the things that are ubiquitous now are different now. And so that's the cool thing about them digging into, here's what was happening during this crazy time in Silicon Valley, is it's so different now that seeing these people do things this way is just crazy. And they talk about in the episode that they built this platform. It wasn't hugely popular here. It was called Bebo. I had never heard of it.
Yeah.
And it was apparently very popular in Europe. It was very, very popular in Singapore. It was something that...
It sounds like a children's toy or a show.
Yeah.
Children's show.
You mean just like semantically, like just the word Bebo?
Yeah. It sounds like it could be like a children's painting game or something.
Yeah, that's true. But they were able to build a strong enough platform in a time when things were expanding. And the whole episode, they're having interviews with the founders. It's a really cool thing that they've done on the show, where they dig in with the people who know the best.
Yeah, it's a
about
mix
what was
between
happening.
narrative and interview and kind of history and journalism. It's I liked it a lot.
And the thing that I loved, and it's kind of the punchline of these two episodes, was that they built this whole social media site, and then they sold it to AOL, like right whenever, like they're like, all right, we've capped this thing out. It's going to start failing. Like MySpace and Facebook have already far surpassed where we're going to be. So let's sell it to AOL.
Let's get out.
And made a ton of money. What did they say? It was
$600 million.
$600 million.
Yeah, it was
They sold it to AOL.
something
But they pocketed
million, but they
600.
pocketed 600 and something.
And so they sold it basically saying, like, have fun, AOL, and walked away with their $600 million. And then they've been entrepreneurs and investors since then and have made billions of dollars from that money. So it's just, I love the fact that they cashed out right before it went downhill. And then AOL was like, this is a huge mistake.
We had this. Yeah, no, and
They said that AOL became known as the place where companies went to die.
Startups go to die over there. And I mean, it's because in the funniest, this is one of those interesting things that you can check out, and kind of like this whole boom in exploring a new genre is AOL was literally the one. Everybody had an AOL email because that was the email. Everybody, you got mail. Everybody had an AOL email, and they ruined it. Like, they just blew up.
Yeah.
And I think it's just because sometimes it can be just a couple decisions start to get over your head, and then it will fall apart. And so that's the cool thing about it. Cool is maybe not the right word, but interesting thing to check out about Silicon Valley. It can be a small mistake. It can be one decision.
The cool thing.
That was the downfall of Friendster. It was infrastructure. Their stuff couldn't keep up. So the experience for the users, it was infrastructure and user experience. So the infrastructure led to long load times, slow response, all of that stuff, which is bad user experience. And then I think their overall like UI and interface that you interfaced with it wasn't good either. There were bugs in it and everything else. So people wanted to use it. They wanted it to be the thing, but it was just glitchy and slow and not good.
And then you get any alternative.
Any alternative
to this,
came up
basically
that
the
did it
same
right.
thing
Yep.
or a little bit better, and then people just jump ship.
Yep. So I think that brings us to one of our discussion points that we want to talk about is we grew up before social media existed. We grew up like in the birth of the internet.
Yeah. I remember the
And-
first time I logged into an internet game. I was playing Counter-Strike, and the first time I logged into a lobby was like a moment for me. I think we played Diablo and stuff too, but it was slightly different.
Yeah.
Like, we would a lot of times play on LAN, so it was like we were all connected, but it wasn't like I'm going to go just into the wild world of the internet and play with random people that I don't know. But the first time I logged in, I was like, okay, this is
These are
wild.
real people I'm playing against.
There is an entire group of random people all across the country that I'm playing this game with right now. And it was a fun thing to experience.
It was
really
exciting.
was.
Like, it was actually something that was exciting to be able to say that you're playing with people around the world.
Yeah.
Or
Although
around the country.
also I will say that was not a cool thing to do at the time. It
no,
was-
we were nerds
No,
for doing
yeah.
it.
like we were not.
But it still felt awesome.
yeah.
Because we were used to LANing, connecting our computers
With a wire.
Yeah, with a wire and playing against each other and thinking that was the best.
and it was fun.
But now we were able to do that
Yep.
with complete strangers.
And it was not something that was popular, but there was definitely a moment for me the first time I logged into Counter-Strike over dial-up internet.
Yep.
That was terrible, but still, I was like, wow,
This is a thing.
This
Yeah.
this is gonna be something real. It's gonna be something significant.
So what is y'all's first memory of anything related to social media? Because mine was AOL, Instant Messenger.
Definitely,
when
that
we
would
were in-
that would have to be the first one.
Yeah.
Was AIM.
When we were in middle
Zach
school,
was the AIM king. I remember you would get on AIM after school.
Spaz
and
yeah.
just- You would just
Just chat up the ladies.
chat up the ladies, man.
Well, that-
and
that
I remember
was the thing.
I'd come to school and everybody else would have all these things that they had talked about on AIM the night before, and I'm like, dang it, I'm out of the loop. And then I finally got on there and I didn't really talk to
You're not
anybody.
wrong. I did.
I
did chat up the ladies a lot. On
I didn't
AIM.
have the mojo when it came to the AIM.
yeah, and it's
I don't.
funny.
I mean, I don't think I had mojo.
No,
I
you
just
had the
tried.
mojo on AIM.
I tried a lot.
You tried hard.
Yeah, at least I put in the effort. It wasn't effective, but I tried.
And the thing that thinking back on it now blows my mind is that people were basically creating their own social media sites with these different platforms leading up to an actual social media site being made, because AOL Instant Messenger was just like you can chat with other people
Yeah,
that have
Facebook
AOL.
chat.
But
Yeah.
then you started having your friends list. Then you started having like away messages and notifications when you weren't there, that if someone messaged you, it would give them like this little away message and you were like, oh, I'm so quirky and weird and talking about penguins or whatever awkward stuff that we were doing in
Is that
middle
the direction
school.
you went?
No.
We're getting
But that's what-
a glimpse into the mind.
No, but that
he was
was
saying
that
something
time.
about penguins.
And so that was, people were doing that on Instant Messenger, and it was just a messaging platform. And then one of y'all mentioned LiveJournal a minute ago.
Yeah, I remember
before
that
we
was the
started
first one
recording.
I remember was looking up song lyrics in a pamphlet from a CD and then typing that out on LiveJournal because I was an angsty little teenager for no reason.
I mean, my first memory of okay, I'm gonna get on social media was Facebook.
Well-
and I was it was first semester.
You didn't have a
were on
MySpace
MySpace
before
before that.
Facebook?
Yeah,
for sure.
I was.
We
on
all had
MySpace. Yeah,
MySpace.
no, MySpace was high school.
So real quick, before we move on from LiveJournal, my LiveJournal, I know for sure that I posted like hardcore Republican musings for some reason, because I was that kind of teenager where I thought I was a Republican. And I went in and edited the HTML on there and made my whole background was Smith & Wesson 50 caliber revolver pistols.
That's wild.
So I was that kid.
No, I didn't have a live journal. I did have a Facebook.
I didn't do much on LiveJournal myself, but I remember using it as how do I get to know this girl? I'm going to read all her LiveJournal stuff.
Right.
Really, it did kind of change. Hey, I'm gonna just look at random girls and be like, hey, I like your live journal, and say, I don't know it, because that wasn't really an option before. It did.
Right.
It did innovate how people can interact, and people went much farther than I did. People were
That's the thing.
literally
It was one of the
dating and
first
stuff.
It was one of the first times that you were able to see someone that everyone had a platform.
Yeah.
And a lot of people used it more than others, but it lets you get to know them before without having to get to know
Well,
them.
and that sounds weird now because it's so ubiquitous. But before, you're not going to meet some random person from a different place that you'll never run into it because you don't run into them. So then this whole world opens up where you're like, I could just be like, okay, who's around? Who just has a MySpace page and look around at it.
And then MySpace, which for anyone that's not old enough to know, what
we
MySpace
are
was or
aging
experienced
ourselves
it,
here.
Oh yeah.
There was a top 8 where you had your top 8 friends. So you would have all your friends.
Oh, man.
And you could put your top 8 friends.
I actually forgot about that.
8 best friends would go in your top 8, and that would show up on your profile
Now,
as
was
these
it
are my
8
best
or was
friends.
it 7 and Tom?
It was 8, and most people kept Tom there.
Yeah, I would always keep Tom in there. He was my first friend.
I thought you couldn't take him out of your top
And
8. You
what a-
could?
what a
I don't think
power-
I could
I don't
unfriend
remember.
him
Okay, that's what it was. You couldn't unfriend him.
because Tom's everybody's friend.
Yeah, what a power move by Tom, the creator of MySpace.
I just
When you
remember it looked like
created
he was
your
like
account-
sitting at a school desk. And he's like,
Yeah, when you created your account, you automatically had a friend with Tom. Tom was your
yeah.
first friend, so he was
Tom
friends
is
with
always
everyone
gonna
on
be your
MySpace. Yeah, so I love that he made that power move of like, when people create an account, I want them to have at least one friend. It's me.
And it's
Hi,
me.
I'm Tom.
I wonder if ever he got on his and is like, I have 50 million friends.
Like, I'm the man. So many people are my friend,
And MySpace was wild too because there was like a music player embedded into your
which was sick. It
page.
was so
when
nice.
people came to your page, it would play your song.
MySpace was actually cooler in a lot of ways than Facebook.
Yeah, there was some cool stuff to it.
because you could customize everything on that.
Yep.
And
you
I
could go
did.
in. I learned HTML to go in
Same.
and customize everything on my MySpace.
Same.
And
You
it
could
was
do
a,
some cool
And I did the
stuff on it.
dumbest, like, teenager,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
edgy idiot stuff
Oh,
that I
so
could
dumb.
possibly imagine. Like, it was like some kind of weird, like, quote unquote ironic background. And like, I just did weird stuff
Yeah.
because I was a teenager.
I wish we could find our.
I really don't.
I do.
I
I want to
really
see
don't
what
wanna see it.
dumb me did.
I
On my- 'cause
guarantee
I don't
it's
remember.
not good. Did they get rid of your
I don't even-
MySpace? They might still be out there.
I think there's possibly ways to get it with the Wayback Machine if they archive it.
Oh yeah.
But
that
can
may
you
have been
look it
before
up?
then.
Like, are they still active? The ones that
Unless you deleted it, it may still be there.
I did not delete it. So
I'm gonna look my MySpace up.
I seriously don't want to look at it. Like, it's not going to be good. It's going to feel bad.
So yeah, we all were on MySpace, and that was a thing.
That
for a
was like
while.
high
And then-
school, I feel
yeah.
like. And then I
Yeah.
got to college, first semester, Facebook was out, and they were saying essentially you had to have a college email to get onto Facebook. So I got a Facebook. And at the time, people were not sharing videos. There wasn't ads. There wasn't like, hey, come play Farmville. It wasn't any of that. It was literally just like, the only thing I think you could do on Facebook was they say, what are you doing right now?
You could post on your wall. You could
Yeah,
put
it's
chat, like you put messages on your wall.
And
of
it's
what you're
like, it
doing.
was like a weird perspective though. It was like, what are you up to right now? It's like, I'm going to school. And then you just like put that up there, and then everybody was just doing that. But you could have, there
could
was
poke people.
friends, you could poke people, you could like make like contacts essentially, but it was very primitive compared to what it is now. And it was something that I also remember that it was like my first semester at college. It's like, I have a college email now, so I can sign up for this. And I did. And it was not what I expected. And also as it progressed, it changed a lot. And I just feel like I never really got into that whole, like, I don't know what it would be called. Like, brand. It's almost like personal branding is what it comes down to. It's like, I'm going to put out like, here's what I'm doing. Here's the lifestyle that I'm putting out there. And sure, there's narcissism and there's like fakeness to it. Don't get me wrong. But that's kind of what it came to.
I think
it's
that's
like, I'm going to put out, here's what I'm putting out. And you got a platform for it. Finally. Like, here's what I'm doing. Here's what I'm up to. Check it out.
Yeah, and I think that's been one of the big shifts in social media from when it was originally started. It was literally people going there to connect with people, have conversations, share information, and have some personality in a digital space a little bit. And now it's very much become a personal branding thing. And that's why I'm done with social media right now. Because it's all advertising, it doesn't seem honest or genuine. It's all very manufactured. And that's been a shift over time where people have grown up with it. They've realized that you can create whatever image you want on your social media, and they're using it to create this image, and they're using it for personal branding, and they're using it for all these other things. It's become kind of an abomination of what it was, where it was a way to connect with people and a way to have your personality be manifest in a digital space.
Yeah, and
now it's different than that.
I won't necessarily say that everybody's being fake, because it really okay. Here's anybody who's young listening to this, get ready for it, because it's going to happen to you too. As you get older, it's like, here's baby pictures. That's literally all Facebook is like, here's a picture of my family at a pumpkin patch. And it's like, okay.
Shut up, Zach. Don't make fun of my pictures that I put about my kids at a pumpkin patch.
Did you do that?
No, but my wife did. She tagged me in them.
Yeah.
That wasn't meant to be personally directed at you.
I know, but my point is, you're completely right.
It just is. It's either you're going to get, okay, here's our family as
Old people
as they
recipes.
grow, or like recipes, weird fake news, garbage articles, or also
You got your uncle, putting his echo chamber stuff that he's heard.
Everyone's got a racist uncle on Facebook.
Yep.
First of all, that's part of the fun, is you get to be like, oh, this guy's an idiot.
Oh, and everyone's got that old friend that they knew at some point during school and they don't keep in touch with anymore. And then all of a sudden they come out of the woodworks and start posting some ludicrous things on Facebook. You're like, oh, I didn't remember that person existed in the world, and now I do. And let me unfriend them real quick.
Here's the other really unfortunate part is you're going to have somebody that's like, I haven't talked to them in 10 years. Sweet. They're talking to me. And then they're going to sell you LuLaRoe freaking leggings.
Or even darker than that, they're going to have like something really difficult happen in their life. And you're like, at one point, I was close to this person. They're going through some junk.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I should reach out or not, because I haven't talked to them in 15 years.
I saw this recently, actually. And I was kind of like, I want to just be like, look, man, this is terrible. But at the same time, I'm not like, you kind of just have these friends that are like relics of the past. And it's not something you actively
And the only reason that that's even a thing is because of social media.
Yep.
We never would have, one, known about it, and two, even had the ability to reach out to them without social media. So it's a double-edged sword in so many ways, just like the internet. I mean, it's a blessing and a curse in a lot of ways.
Sure.
I love this show. It's fascinating how they dive into where things came from, where they matured to, the competitiveness, where they basically, Bebo was a ripoff of Friendster. They literally took all the code for Friendster and basically said, let's tweak this, and then change a few more things. All right, now we got Bebo. And they made that's how they made their competitors.
Made $600 million.
Yeah. So it's wild to hear about how different things were and how things matured and got to where they are now. And it's a really well done show.
Yeah, absolutely.
It takes you on a ride, and it's really, really...
Seriously, if you're at all interested in this type of stuff, it's so crazy to hear about this entire, basically just Silicon Valley, what they were doing, the rises and falls that were constant over there, the tech companies that were trying to break through. It's just really crazy.
All right, so I'm going to double up and give you guys another recommendation.
All right, let's hear it.
I've been listening to this podcast called Van Sounds. It is this guy, Phil Corbett. I heard about him through 20,000 Hertz, which was another podcast we talked about recently and have talked about before in the past. And
He doesn't just like stick the microphone in the muffler or something of a van, does he?
No, that is
sounds
not
horrible.
It's
no.
a weird ASMR podcast about vans.
No,
I wouldn't. It's Josh's retaliation for my spooky.
Yeah, it is. No, this podcast is really interesting. He's an audio engineer of some sort. So he does really high definition audio for all of his podcast, and he'll just go out and be in places and you hear the ambient sounds and you hear really interesting stuff, but he also does things and he also will go interview people, and there's really interesting podcasts that he's done. He's done one on death metal in Nepal. He's done one on hobos, tramps, and bums and the difference between those and skipping trains and the sounds that you hear from that and what a train yard at night sounds like. There's really interesting stuff that he puts in his podcast, and you wouldn't believe the amount of detail you can get just from hearing the high definition audio that he includes. But the specific episode I'm recommending is called Rule of Thumb, and it is about hitchhiking.
Sounds interesting. I'm looking forward to it.
It's very interesting. So go out and listen to it. And if you like this episode, other ones I recommend are Kathmandu 666, Hobo, a Tramp, a Bum, and Lucian Part 1, 2, 3, and 4. So the episode we're recommending is Rule of Thumb.
And remember,
there's always more to discover.
Thank you for listening to the Podcast Discovery Show. We have a few things we'd like to tell you. First, We would love to hear from you on Twitter at the PDS Official or in our Facebook group, the Podcast Discovery Club.
Secondly, leaving a rating or review on iTunes helps tremendously in giving us visibility and also visibility to the podcast that we recommend. You can also check out our Patreon page to get exclusive bloopers, old episode archives, and other exclusive content while supporting the show.
Finally, seriously, get in touch. We'd love to hear from you about what you love about podcasts. And thank you for being a part of all of the things that we do.
This was a podcast from the Podfix Network. You can check out more shows like it at podfixnetwork.com.